Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the third edition of the Maine Speaker Series. This program has been a wonderful program throughout the fall, and we've had just tremendous success with these presentations, and tonight will be no exception. We have an outstanding presentation given tonight by one of our more respected clinicians here in Maine. He's a long-time interpreter of Board 21. He's served as the MPA tournament site supervisor for 17 years. He's an IBO Life member, and he achieved the honor of being the president of IBO for a couple years ago. He's just a wonderful clinician, and we can't be more thankful enough to have him here tonight to talk about this topic. It's Barry Fuller, and let's do it by the book. Barry?
Thanks, TJ, and welcome to everyone here tonight. It's a good thing, this speaker series, because it brings it home to Maine, as opposed to maybe just watching the ones on the IABO website. We recently went to Gettysburg for the fall meeting for interpreters and all others if they wish to go. And there was no less than 4 presentations that talked about signals and communication. I don't think it was a coincidence. There's an issue across the country with officials doing it by the book. And I will say up front, from what I see, watching videos, and that's not a true representative, but I've also heard this from Peter Webb several times and somewhat from TJ, who travels a lot, that Maine is one of the best ones when it comes to this. So for some of you, this may be a little redundant, but yet if you pick up one thing, it will be worthwhile. So thanks to the people that helped contribute to this presentation. I got to highlight Dick Gordon, special, my friend. We'll talk about flow a little bit later, and he is always pulling my chain about that one topic. So with that, let's get started. And page down. All right, before we do talk about the topic, something I pulled from Jeff Jewett's presentation in Gettysburg. He was a history teacher. He always brings something up regarding history. So in 1936, the rule requiring a jump ball after each score was eliminated, because they used to do that. After each score, the team that was scored upon did not get the ball. They went to center court and they jumped the ball again. Obviously, the ball had to be declared dead after the score to facilitate the jump ball. So once this jump ball was eliminated, why did the Rules Committee continue with the ball being dead after each score? So you may know this. If you don't, if you want to guess, you're welcome to send a chat to TJ, and I'll collect those answers, and we'll talk about it briefly at the end of the presentation. So moving on, definitions. Signals. Signals of movement of the hands, arms, and legs without moving the body. Okay. Mechanics are movements of the entire body, positioning on the court. And then procedures are a series of actions by the official to facilitate dead ball. Okay, in most cases, it's a dead ball. Okay. Now note that when signals are given, the body should not be moving. The exception to that is stepping forward, whether it be on a violation or illegal contact, to kind of help present who the violator is. So there is the one exception on that. A lot of officials, when they talk about mechanics, they're really talking about signals. They'll say his mechanics are really good, but really, in fact, it's the signals they're talking about. So unapproved signals here in Maine, and like I said, our officials are really quite good. But there are some things we can get better at. Now, one of the things that I've seen, and I see this in the tournament too, and that's one of the things that we look for. It's just one piece of the package that you should be bringing to the tournament. But improper beckoning. 30-second timeout signal, the kick, as simple as the kick signal is, we get it wrong. Held ball last year was something new for us. Took a while for many officials to get into that groove, but they did in the end, I believe. Walking while traveling and turning the back on players, and I have no idea where this came from, but it became a fashion to do that. And we still have some older officials, or more experienced officials, I should say, that still use that approach. Backcourt signal changed like 15 years ago. Some people haven't got up to speed on that. Technical foul, we'll talk a little bit about that, a little more about that later. Not closely guarded. Actually, the people that use the not closely guarded signal are using it properly. Unfortunately, we don't have that signal in Maine. We figure that if you're not counting, then it's not a closely guarded scenario. So we got to get rid of that. And then we've got the off the knee, off the head, off the line, wherever, and they point to that. They feel that's part of the out of bounds violation signal. Also, starting the clock. Some of this is trickled down from college. Okay, stopping the clock for foul or violation. These are things that you've got to work hard to get rid of if you have those types of fouls: blocking, holding, technical foul. On the technical foul, most people get the T part of it right, but they throw this emotion in, and it becomes all this animated and gestures and so forth that cause additional, interpersonal problems. Okay, and Al Halliday, my mentor, told me once. He says, "It's just another call," and I remembered that. As a matter of fact, he took it a step further, and he said, "Barry, when you give a technical foul to a coach," he said, don't report it on the coach." He said, "Report it on the bench. So go to the table and say technical foul on the blue bench, but then follow it up with charge it directly to the head coach." So it takes this personal thing out of it, and it might even pull down the whole tension of the thing. So I always did that, and I made it a point to practice that as much as possible. Let's take a look at an example, and this is a little bit exaggerated, but this is an actual game. So we have a block charge situation here, and we've got two officials, and we need to watch both of them, because although one of them is really grabbing our attention because the dramatic selling of the call, so to speak, also the lead official, who will come into the picture in just a minute, watch this official as well. So he's canceling the goal while his partner's going to count it, and then he's winding up to punch down towards the other end of the court and throw his shoulder out. But halfway through, he decides he's to give it up to his partner, who, quite frankly, mechanically, this was his ruling. He probably should have been a little closer to the lane line, but he had a pretty good look at it from where he was, I believe. Okay, so maybe in this case, even though it was a double whistle, they obviously didn't look at each other before they started to commit. And probably we would have been better off if they had both called what they saw, which means we would have had a double foul. Okay, and the penalty would have been different. So bottom line here is neither one of them made eye contact. Neither one of them signaled stop clock before they committed to what they had for a ruling. Okay, so it's a problem. So why do officials use unapproved signals? There's a variety of reasons, and some of this is speculation, but you can kind of weigh in on this if you'd like. It looks too cool for school. They want to look cool. Okay, or they just totally disregard the book. I mean, those funny pictures in the book there, they don't spend any time on those, or if they do, they say, "I'm not going to do it like that. It looks too geeky." Or they're doing a ton of AAU or summer league games, and through muscle memory and the fact that those games are wanted to be handled differently, they get out of the mode of high school IABO signals and so forth. Or they're just lazy, little or no attention to detail. Or, if you heard Charlie's presentation last Wednesday, basically comes down to no pride. Some of them like the way it looks, and they think it may indicate to others, the fans or the coaches, that they're really a college official. So they're going to use college signals. And ironically, most of the signals in the college are the same as the ones in high school. It's just, it seems like there's less discipline at the college level on signals. So they kind of add their own personality into it. Or they come to do a high school game and they get mixed up, and whether they're doing AAU or whatever, and that comes into muscle memory. So you got to commit. You got to commit to the game you're doing that night, and you got to think about it. And I've known some officials that could flick a switch and do college one day, and the next day they do high school, and they do it exactly right. So it's a credit to them having pride in what they do. And the other thing is, why does it matter if I get the call right? That's an attitude. And it does matter. And if it didn't matter, then why not do it right as opposed to doing it your own way? And also, it's good preventive officiating. Let's see, there's more of this. Counting and awarding of goals. Have you ever seen someone cancel a goal where the ball didn't go in the basket? Or the try never left the hand of the shooter, and they're canceling the goal? 60-second timeout. We still have people doing the full timeout thing, and that's been around a long time. A lot of emphasis has been put on that. As silly as it sounds, but that's maybe a trickle down from the college as well. Not closely guarded. As I mentioned, we don't have that signal in Maine. Indicating throw in spot with one finger is what's supposed to happen. Some people are using full 4 fingers, full palm. Beckoning substitutes. This one here is kind of comical because there's a little bit of everything. Two-handed, waving in multiple times over the hand, that kind of thing, or the tickle. That's one that always makes me smile. But it's not the way it's supposed to be done. It's a simple signal in the book, and it's very clear. One time, bring them in, make eye contact with the sub that's reported. The directional signal is supposed to be 4 fingers, cup, thumb, not 1 or 2 fingers. That's another. I think maybe that came from the college game, the 2-finger thing, women's maybe. Also, counts, and this is an important one. Really, it affects the game directly. 10-second count, 5-second count. You need to be accurate with your counts. And the one that really demonstrates this is the 10-second count. If you are off on your count by 0.2 of a second on your backcourt count, 0.2, that's not very long. You're giving one team an advantage of an additional 2 seconds to get the ball into front court status. Or you're shortcutting one team by two seconds. So you have to be disciplined on this. Take pride in getting your counts right. Okay. Practice this at home, but also too, if you have a game early on, not often is there a lot of pressure in the backcourt early in the game. So as the ball is controlled in the backcourt, glance at the clock. And then when the ball gets front court status, glance at the clock again, see if it matches your count. Okay, you may need to adjust, because when it becomes really critical at the end of the game, and having a premature whistle is not going to be good for your evening. That's for sure. 3-point attempt, arm closest to the division line, seems kind of trivial. You got to pick the correct arm, but towards the division line is where the table best sees what you're trying to communicate. And it's 3 fingers head high, not straight up in the air like other levels do. Try to be disciplined with this as well. And a successful touchdown signal, pretty straightforward. And then this becomes a habit for some officials, 2 or 3-point clarification. So many times we're seeing clearly someone stepped on the line. You can see it from the cheap seats, but yet the official feels obligated to stick 2 fingers towards the floor to communicate with the table. And quite frankly, at that point, the table's not even looking anyway, because they know it was obviously not a 3-point. There are times where it have to be clarified, and if the table is unsure, they'll take the first opportunity to ask you, was that a 2 or a 3? Okay. So if you happen to notice too that it should have been a 3 and they only put 2 up. You have the ability to stop play the first appropriate time and correct the situation. Okay? We don't want to be trying to figure it out at the end of the quarter, but it's just one of those things where it becomes a habit where it's fashionable to do. So in the guidance of signals, okay, signals are the primary means of communication. Okay, you could probably go the whole game without speaking if your signals are really good. Okay, we must speak the same language, and that's what we're talking about. It's the language of the officials to communicate. Signals not intended to draw attention to ourselves. Okay, the whistle does that. We have the whistle to let everyone in the gymnasium know that we have some information to share. Okay. Now, once the whistle's blown and you get your hand in the air, your arm in the air, now we can go to our right by the book signals and communicate effectively. And you know, if somebody's doing this on a regular basis, okay, signals, clear, slow, deliberate, you know, people appreciate that, okay? They know what you're saying, okay, as opposed to running through them really fast. So use only approved signals. Be consistent with it. Be consistent with your signals. And once you learn, you know, it's going to become muscle memory. You know, I was very fortunate in my career. My interpreter was Jeff Jewett. I had to go to board 20 to start my career because we didn't have an assigner down here. So I was a dual member, but Jeff was the interpreter. And he was big on signals, and I went to his camp first 3 years that he ran it. And then I was fortunate enough to have a mentor in Al Halliday who, you know, I would like to say always did everything right. So I was very fortunate. So it became muscle memory for me early on. And all I had to worry about at that point was getting my rulings correct. The other thing was, at the time, I really appreciated it because of the discipline in the Central Maine board at that time. Okay, I had a different partner many nights, but you could always count on everyone doing it the same way. And that's such a good feeling as opposed to getting used to a new partner night after night. Here's another example here. I'm not sure if he's saying that's not closely guarded or not. So I'll play this again and count the number of improper signals. So did you pick up on the lead as well? No stop clock, pointed to who the ball went off from. Okay, yep. And this guy here, at first I thought maybe he had beans to eat the night before because he's just locked in. Or maybe is that a soccer signal possibly? So I don't know how many you got, but there's several there. Play on, nothing to see here. That was the obvious one to start it off. But then he gives a directional signal when the ball changed directions, even though it was a live ball. Okay. And then we had a 2-hand stop the clock, allow the subs, and then the ones that I mentioned for the lead. I would like to have seen more of that game to see if this was the way the whole game went, because it's really be interesting to know how they made out and whether or not there was confusion at the benches and with the fans and so forth. So having mentioned consistency, what is consistency regarding officials, in regards to officials? Are you consistent from start to finish of the game? Are you consistent with your partner? Are you consistent from night to night? And are you consistent with a crew that did last night's game? And are you consistently right or wrong? Okay, now the last one there, right or wrong, there's a whole slew of opportunities during the game, as you know, right? We're talking about rulings. But here, I'm talking about signals and mechanics as well. but signals particularly tonight. Okay, do you look the same as your partner with your signals? Okay? Are you using the same signals all throughout the game? Or sometimes you're getting all wound up about a player control foul and just losing control with your signals. Okay? So that's the question. So are you consistently doing it by the book? It's something to work towards. And quite frankly, if you haven't seen yourself on video in the last 2 years, you really need to do that. There's so many opportunities now with NFHS and seeing games online, or even if you ask someone to go and video you, where the camera is on you throughout, right? As opposed to the online. Sometimes you're in the picture and sometimes you're not. But that's a good thing to do, to see what you're doing. It also tells you how well you're moving. There's all kinds of things you can gain from watching yourself officiate. So let's cross over a little bit into preventive officiating. It's a phrase that you probably hear in all sports. You hear commentators on TV use it all the time, and not that they know what they're talking about. But preventive officiating is an approach to refereeing that aims to prevent problems before they happen. It involves advising, warning, and encouraging players to play within the rules to create a fair and enjoyable game for fans and the teams. Preventive officiating starts in the pregame. The approach is similar to preventive medicine, which aims to stop problems before they happen. Preventive officiating takes two forms: helping players avoid technical violations and warning players about negative results of their actions. That's wrong. Okay, that came from the internet, and you can find anything on the internet, and a good chunk of it's wrong. Okay, so that is not what preventive officiating for officials is about. And it may be accurate for other sports, okay, but for basketball, it's not. So what is it? What is preventive officiating? Is it talking to players? Is it explaining to coaches without them asking you for anything? Is it wiping up the floor yourself when there's sweat on the floor? Is it giving unofficial warnings? Is it preventing a substitute from coming in illegally? Or is it charging in on a routine held ball? Are those preventive officiating tactics? So what are good ones? A solid pregame with partners in the table. That is a must. That can prevent so many problems during the course of the game. And if you do junior high games, you know that table personnel is not exactly what it could be, and you may have a correctable error because of it, or you may be buzzed back to give the number of the offender on an illegal contact. Okay, so those are the kind of things that a solid pregame with partners in the table can really help prevent problems. Is it stepping between players? In this case, it is. If there's going to be some extracurricular activity after a hard rebound or a pig pile on the floor, yes, that is our obligation for high school officials. It's not stand back and take numbers. It's you get in between and do as much as you can without touching, and sometimes you have to touch. But the bottom line here is we are obligated to do that to prevent extracurricular activity. Okay, it's not to prevent someone from getting a technical foul or getting penalized for fighting. Okay, it's about safety for the players. That's why we do that. Also, knowing the rules, mechanics, signals, and procedures. That's preventive officiating, because it will prevent problems like correctable error. It will double whistle problems. There's all kinds of things that it will prevent. That it will help if you do your due diligence on rules, mechanics, signals, and procedures. Right, and then have your pregame with. And it's also doing your job as the off official, and this is something we really need to talk about in pregame. But picking up the shooter year after year, we have issues where the wrong shooter goes to the line, or we don't know who should be going to the line for the free throw. Okay, and it happens to the best of us, right? But it's focus, but sometimes it has to do with communication via signals, right? It's up to the ruling official to communicate to his partners, right? Making eye contact, so critical, right? And I was watching a tournament game once, and we had a crew of three, and we had illegal contact, and the lead official and the center official had a double whistle. Neither one of them knew the other one had a whistle, and they actually met at the table to both report the foul. Okay, that's when they found out that their partner also had a whistle, and that's not good. Okay, so it was a little bit embarrassing. So that preventive officiating is part of our package, but it's not what most people think it is. And also speaks for itself, getting to the game early. You know, you never know what's going to happen on the way to the game. You never know if you're going to have to evaluate the JV officials because your partner doesn't show up and you've got to pick one of them to work with you. Those are the kind of things that getting to the game can really help with. And plus, it gives you a feel for the gym. It gives you a feel for the fans that are going to be there that night. Is this going to be a tough contest, and so forth and so on. So getting to the gym early is part of preventive officiating. Now, there's also some unapproved communications. One of them is actually tied to the unapproved signals. Legally blocked try for goal. I mean, you've seen people use this, right? So the shot goes up, and you've got the lead official giving a tap like that, meaning it's a good block. And at the same time, you may have the trail official giving a illegal contact on the same play. We have that line of demarcation between the trail and the lead, right? So whose is it? We have the trail that's carrying the ball over to that point, and there's a jump shot that's taken right at the intersection of lead, trail, PCA, and the PCA, the lead's already picked up on it, and we have two whistles. So that's not a good situation. So if one's got legally blocked and the other's got illegal contact, that's going to lead to problems, especially when we report the foul at the table. The official is going to hear it from one of the coaches for sure. Verbal warnings do not fall on our list of responsibilities. Do not. You've heard some of them. Maybe you've used some of these. Hands off, get out of the lane. That's too much contact. Now, all of that is not good. That's not our responsibility. Okay, these are coaching directives, not preventive officiating. And so if you do use these, are you being fair to both teams? Okay, would one of the teams rather have that 3-second violation ruled rather than have you tell the player to get out of the lane? Obviously, you're favoring one team if you do that. So if coaches hear you do this, they're probably thinking and wondering, what you're telling them and whether or not you should be telling it, or if is it contradictory to what they're coaching. About 5 or 6 years ago, Referee Magazine did a survey of our coaches, asking them what were the things about officials that bothered them the most. And the number one thing was officials talking to their players. And this covered all sports, right? In some sports, you don't have the opportunity. I'm guessing in football, it's not as likely that you're that close to the players where you can talk to them. I don't know that. But in basketball, you're engaged throughout. And there's plenty of opportunity if you choose to do so. But I would really like to see it eliminated. There's no reason for it. You penalize if there's something wrong, whether it's a violation for 3 seconds, whether it's illegal contact. Penalize, and that's how we correct the action. So, having said that, what about Rule 10.4.6b? A player shall not use profane or inappropriate language. We've all heard it. Some of us penalize and some of us don't. So what are the excuses for not penalizing if it is against the rules? Here's a few. She was just frustrated with themselves. So apparently that rationalizes. Or no one heard it but me. Or it wasn't directed at anyone. Or they're just used to using the F-bomb in normal conversation, which is probably true, but this is sports and education, or education in sports, I should say. It's an extension of the classroom. Now, I've been out of high school for a few years, so I don't know if the F-bomb is allowed in the classrooms today or not, but I'm assuming it's not. And so on the court, it's not either. You don't hear coaches using this language. Okay, if they do, they should certainly be penalized as well, even if it's against their own, if towards their own team. I mean, that's not education in sports. Or I'm not going to impact the game in this situation. Right? Maybe I would have called it in the first quarter, but I'm not going to call it now because the score is tied. That kind of excuse. Or that's my partner's call. Well, you know this, if you think it's your partner's call because it happened close to your partner, obviously you heard it, the other players heard it, probably at least one of the benches heard it, and some of the fans. So if that is not ruled a technical foul, then you're probably going to have more of it in the game. Or that would be his or her fifth foul, and there's just absolutely no excuse for using this excuse. But for somebody to say that is a problem. So anyway, enough of that. So let's talk about flow. What is flow? Blowing the whistle less? Some people seem to think so. Can officials control flow? Should officials control flow? Well, unlike signals, mechanics, procedures, just knowing how, for example, knowing the rules, it's not enough. So signals, mechanics, procedures, they're black and white. There's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it. But we have other parts of the game. Matter of fact, the bigger part of the game is probably has to do with the incidental contact interpretation. This is critical, right? And blowing the whistle is based on good judgment and the guidance we have of speed, quickness, balance, and rhythm. Were they affected, right? And that takes experience for sure. And it's not as black and white as the others. Not interjecting your personal philosophy is important, okay? And some people do this. Hey, look, this is a double-A game tonight. We're going to let them bang. This is not good for basketball. This is not the college game. And these are some of the things that you might hear someone say. Let's make the first foul a good one, which is saying that let's get things off on the right foot. Everybody in the gym is going to know that it was a foul when we blow the whistle the first time. Or let's let them play. Or put the whistle in your pocket in the last minute. Or keep the clock running. Or no long switches tonight. That's the one where the illegal contact's in the backcourt. And don't want to switch. Or no switching at all. And this happens so often in middle school games. It's a situation where it's like a day off to a middle school game, and unfortunately, a lot of our newer officials are working these games, and they're trying to do it right. And it's important for our veterans to appreciate that and really focus on doing it right themselves. If it's not habit for them, then at least focus so that they can, that night or that afternoon, they can help out this newbie. So how do we control flow? So first of all, refer to the way to implement preventive officiating. A lot of it's the same, right? But also solid pregame again with partners and table, knowing the rules, mechanics, signals, and procedures. Okay, if you're not bumbling procedures, you're not screwing up mechanics, the flow is going to be better. or hustling without hurrying. That's an important one. Walking to the table or walking from point A to point B, right? We should be hustling when we can, but without hurrying. Keeping conversations short and to the point, okay? Especially if the coach is asking you a question. Okay? Let him speak, tell him what you saw, and let him speak again, and that should be the end of it. But going back and forth, and for heaven's sake, I hope your partner is not putting the ball in play while you're over there talking to the coach. Okay? We need to have all officials covering the players, and also speak the same language. Okay, that will prevent confusion. And we already talked about a couple of things that, like correctable errors and being called back to the table because the tables wasn't sure what you had for a number on the illegal contact, or those kind of things. All of those things fall into the category of what you can control when it comes to flow. And it was kind of funny. Dick Gordon brought this up to me because on the comments on the rule changes for this year, when talking about eliminating the 1-and-1, and the reason that they did, the Rules Committee said, and I'll quote, "Resetting the fouls after each quarter has a potential to provide a better flow by allowing teams that run into early foul trouble." Well, this is flow having to do with teams. They're in control of that. And we've all had these games where we're in the double bonus with 6 minutes into the first quarter, right? So it makes for a long half. But that's on the teams. Now, the rules are going to provide so that we don't have that carried into the second quarter, which is a good thing. I think it will work out fine. But that is not flow that the officials control. That is flow that the players and the teams control themselves. So one of the things I want to pass on tonight is one of the key resources we have. It's an outstanding resource. It's the Maine Signals and Mechanics Differences, because we do have some differences, and they're for good reasons. It's the Maine State Basketball Council website, and this is it. And it's so easy to get to, and it's organized so well. You can go right to where you want to, if you want signals or if you want to talk about uniforms or whatever it is, you can go right there and get all your information. It's a 5-minute project to look it up and get the information you want. And one of them, which is something we still need to work on, that's on our website, State Council website, is the substitution procedure, which is different from IABO's manual. Probably about 20 years ago or more, Jeff Jewett came up with this as the interpreter of Board 20 at the time. We were having issues with 6 players on the court. So it was driving this question about how does that happen? Well, after investigating, we found that the official near the table was bringing subs in without making eye contact with his partner, and his partner was handing the ball to the thrower in. So we had 6 players on the court. So in jest, without reading through the whole process, it means that the administrating official is the only one that should be bringing the subs in. Because obviously, if he's bringing subs in, he's not handing the ball to the thrower in. Now, having said that, you get into the rest of the procedure, and it talks about a couple of exceptions. One of them is when you report a foul at the table, you should bring them in and pass them off to the administrating official. So we won't spend a lot of time on that, but this procedure is clear as a bell, and still we have officials that either are ignoring it or they don't know it, and it's causing problems still on the floor. 6 players on the court. Some of the reasons not use unapproved signals. So confusing, unclear, and misinterpreted. These are to your partner, the table personnel, the coaches, the players, the spectators, and the ramification for individual officials. All of the above, and it delays and prevents promotion or upward mobility. The standard has changed for moving into the varsity level. The standard has changed for moving into the tournament. The whole package is needed. It's not just being able to call a good game. He calls a good game. That's not what it is anymore. Now it's He calls a good game, and he's got approved signals, mechanics, and procedures. He's in shape. He runs well. That, and I say he, but it's he, she. And it's the whole package that is being looked at now. So be aware of that. And if that's your goal, is to move up, or if it's your goal to stay at the highest level, then you need to work on these things. Now, also, too, I'm not going to go through each one of these because these are procedures, mechanics procedures for fouls. Okay, it's all in the book, very clear. Really, you should tag that page and read it every couple of weeks. For veterans, maybe halfway through the year. If you're not having somebody video you, or if you're not having looking at yourself online, then you don't know what you're doing wrong. So all these steps are clear as a bell in the book, and the sooner you learn them, the sooner they'll become muscle memory, and it will save you. Because when the time comes and you have a double foul, it can be confusing. You got a couple numbers to remember. You got, throw and spot to remember. You got communication to your partner. I mean, double foul, it can throw you for a loop. Okay, and getting to the table and forgetting one of the numbers is not fun. So work hard at it. Okay, and it's also we have the table reporting as well. It's all in the book. Go through the whole process. Practice makes perfect. So go through it. And the same thing for violations. Very clear on how to go about it. And when you work with a partner that you've never worked with, and he's doing all these things right, you're gonna feel right at home. And the table appreciates it too when you do all these things right, because they like to see the same thing night after night in terms of communication. Some of the other things that I'd like to talk about in the pregame, okay, that are not just common discussions. The last minute of the quarter time acknowledgement. Yeah, you should be aware of the clock. Okay, one of the things that Al Halliday always told me was every trip as trail down the court, I glanced at the clock. Just a quick glance. It takes about 0.2 of seconds to glance up there and see what the time is. Those are the kind of things. But towards the end of the game, it becomes more important, or even end of the quarter. Clock responsibility. Who's going to have it? Rotation whenever needed. I hear some officials, and they'll talk about this in the pregame, and say, well, we're going to lock down and we're not going to rotate in the last 30 seconds. I don't know about you, but the games I'm doing, the ball can change hands 4 times in the last 30 seconds. Okay, so I like to say rotate as needed. Okay, so if it comes down to 10 seconds left and you need to rotate to make sure you get the right ruling, then do it. But that is to be discussed in the pregame. The system of disqualifying a player, that's important. Going through the right steps for that. The multiple whistle situations, talk about that in your pregame. Okay, it's not all about the mechanics. It's not all about the rulings. And then also help situations, very critical there too, because you will need help at some point, and it's good to know when you should help and when you shouldn't. So the old school is changing, as I mentioned before. Proper mechanics and improved signals, it's replacing some of the old fly by the seat of your pants. Inserting philosophical rationale or justifications for not following prescribed methods, then yeah, it's going out the window, and don't get left behind, right? Your experience should not supersede these things. So don't get caught up in that. If you are, you can make a change. I know you can make a change if you work at it. Didn't want to disrupt the flow of the game. Well, yeah, that's something we don't want to do. So convincing officials to do it by the book. Board members who may have their own way of doing things used to garner respect. Okay, they did the state championship game last year, so they're automatically respected, regardless of how they operate on the floor. Coaches and ADs, they see them, they expect to see them in their gym at night. This is changing. So officials that supply the complete package are leading the charge of doing it by the book. They are the ones that are the new officials are watching. So you are being observed. If you're moving up the ladder, you're being observed, or you should ask to be observed. Coaches, fans, and supervisors are all watching. In Maine, site supervisors of the NPA tournament are making it a point to watch officials on the rise, and many others. Okay? Your job, if you're looking to move up, as a newer official, nail the mechanic signals and procedure requirements. They will become muscle memory, and the sooner you do, the more you can focus on rulings. And really, the rulings are going to make or break you, but these other things should be in your package from your second year on. So do it by the book. If you're already doing varsity games, know that you're being watched. Coaches, fans, and supervisors are all watching. In Maine, site supervisors of the NPA tournament are making it a point to watch officials who may be less than the officials on the rise. Okay, it's a natural progression. Okay, people are coming up through, and other people are going to be sliding back. Okay, that doesn't mean they're not valuable, but coaches and teams and schools expect the best. Your job as a veteran, stay up to speed with changes. Show that you care. Get in condition. Share your knowledge if you are doing it by the book. Don't share your knowledge if you aren't. This is a year of multiple changes. So let's get on it early and do it by the book. This is an example here of what can go wrong. Looks like that violation was missed. Get another free throw here. Looks like that violation was missed. Looks like that violation was missed. And it made the difference on who got the rebound. Some people might call those minor violations. So in the post game, these are some of the comments that the crew came up with. We should have gotten this one right. Should have gotten them all right. Okay. So why does it matter whether we use signals mechanics if we're getting the rulings right? Why does it matter? Well, if it really doesn't matter how we do it, then why not do it by the book? Learn the right way, and you'll never have to think about it again unless they change the mechanic of the signal. Okay, so let's answer the question that was on slide number 2.
We had 2 people respond to that question.
Oh, okay.
Bob King responded by saying it was let's see, get the chat here. to allow for a timeout during that dead ball. I got that right. Yeah, if not, ball not dead, scoring team could not call a timeout. That was his response. And then Mark McGinnis decided to go to Chat GPT and it says, while the elimination of the jump ball was intended to reduce stoppages and speed up the game, the rule that the ball is declared dead after each score is retained to maintain fairness, give teams equal opportunities, and ensure the game remains organized. Those are the two responses.
Okay. Well, actually, there's rule support for this, and as you might expect, and when can timeouts be granted, right? And Bob is right, and Mark is right in a way. Timeout may be granted, in these situations, but it gives both teams. It's fair to both teams to be able to call a timeout after the ball goes through the basket, because as you know, towards end of game situations, one team probably wants to have a timeout or to at least stop the clock and keep it stopped, okay? And the other team may not. So in fairness, both teams, because only one team will have player control and team control. So that's the reason, okay? So it was a smart move on the part of the Rules Committee, and that's why we will continue to have that, and that's why you should work hard at knowing when the ball is at the disposal of the thrower in. Well, that's about it. Thank you for listening. Hopefully I didn't take too long here. 7:51.
We got some questions here. Mr. Gordon makes a statement here. Proper three-point mechanics in the Leeds PCA. Do you have any comments on how that should be done?
Yeah, the league obviously is not as visible to the table as the trail. So the lead signals the three-point attempt and signals the good goal if it is a good goal, and then it is echoed by the trail, right? The lead doesn't do any echoing if the trail has responsibility, that PCA. Right? The other thing that may be said at the same time in the same conversation is when it's in that gray area between PCAs, the primary responsibility should fall on the trail, because chances are the lead has other things, specifically rebounding and jockeying for position on rebounding, that may be more important in his PCA. So if two hands go up, signaling a three, the lead should drop and refocus on the rest of his PCA.
Okay, good. Now, if you could do me a favor, could you tell the audience what the change this year is going to be in Maine on the three-person free throw administration coverage between the center and the trail?
Yeah, one of the things that was observed in Crew of Three in past years was the center had a tremendous amount of responsibility. The center had the free thrower, the top two positions across the lane, along the lane, also all of the players around the three-point arc. That all fell on the C, including the flight of the ball, right, and chopping in time. So it was very heavily weighing on the center. The trail had nothing other than being a backup for violations that were obvious, that did not get picked up by the lead of the C, right? And also violations, that were out of their purview. So the bottom line was the trail didn't have a whole lot going on. So we've decided here in Maine to share that load. So now the trail has responsibility for players along the arc for violations, also has the flight of the ball, right? And also continues to be the backup for the other two officials. So that's the change in Maine. So the trail now has additional responsibilities for free throw violations and the like.
Very good. I got a theoretical question for you. Let's say you hear a coach or maybe even a sportscaster, someone on the radio talking about our game, and they make the statement that all we want from officials is consistency. How do you react to something like that?
You mean internally or at the time?
Well, how would like if you heard that statement in front of people and you wanted to respond to that statement, what would be the best way to respond?
Well, we try to be consistently right. Right? It's as I mentioned in the one slide there. It's very difficult between officials to be consistent. And if you watch Major League Baseball, you know night to night, and these guys are very good, but consistency on the strike zone is a problem. Okay, so it's no different on the basketball court. If a coach says that in a derogatory method, approach to me, that's a different situation. Okay, if he yells at me something like that, I would certainly give him a warning for that. All right, because that's not adding to the game. That's going to cause me to be thinking about him rather than the game. So from a coach, from a sports official, if they're bringing this up and asking me that question, I tell them, we're going to work hard to be consistent about doing it right and by the book. Okay, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but we're working hard to get there, and that's one of the reasons that we have these clinics to kind of share the information so everybody is on the same page and we can be consistent.
Very good, very good. Now, my question to you, I think the statement that we care very much about the accuracy of our rulings, and I think it's probably the most important thing we do as far as keeping the balance of play between the two teams. But we here in Maine have a long-standing tradition of being that adamant about our signals. Can you, as a site supervisor and as an interpreter, can you talk about why we spend so much time emphasizing that aspect of our profession?
Well, basically, in a nutshell, we expect people to have the whole package, right? You can be very good at ruling on travel, or you can be very good at ruling on illegal contact. But if you can't communicate those kind of things properly, it will lead to confusion, and it will lead to poor flow in some cases, or correctable errors. Those are the kind of things. So if you have your signals and mechanics and procedures nailed, right, we as an assigner, whether it be the tournament or regular season, we can put you on any game with any person and know that it's going to be done right. And if it's not by your partner, then it's going to have influence on them, and it's also going to have influence on up and coming officials. Watching people like that, and you can talk to most varsity officials, and they'll tell you who the best officials are. And when you boil it down, what makes them the best, they're going to have the complete package, right? So